Tonight on the docket, violence in YBOR, 2 shootings in 2 weeks, a controversial club finally closed, and an old reputation revisited. What has changed over the years, and is YBOR still safe? Carrie+ of the Gaybor District Coalition joins me tonight to explain the progress YBOR has made and what still needs to change. Then, the scandal at Penn State grows by the day. Shocking new evidence surfaces about why Coach Jerry Sandusky's bond was set at only $100,000 for the 40 charges he was indicted on. And 2 disturbing interviews with Sandusky himself. Attorney Keith GOAN joins me to break down where the case is headed. And from accused murderer to convicted murderer, a Tampa jury finds Humberto Delgado guilty of first-degree murder in the shooting death of Tampa Police Corporal Mike Roberts. Good evening, everyone. I'm Felix Vega, and welcome to On the Docket for this Wednesday, November the 16th. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. We have another packed show for you tonight. As I was saying, the scandal at Penn State has dominated the headlines in the past few days, and the investigation is only getting bigger. We'll have much more on that story in our second half hour. But first, we want to get caught up on today's top stories on the docket at 5:02, and that includes the guilty verdict handed down by a Tampa jury against Humberto Delgado, the man now convicted of first-degree murder, premeditated murder for the shooting death of Tampa Police Corporal Mike Roberts in August of 2009. It took the jury about 5 hours to unanimously decide that Delgado shot and killed Corporal Roberts on that August night. The penalty phase of the trial begins on Thursday, when jurors will decide whether Delgado should die by lethal injection or spend the rest of his life in prison. And ironically, as Delgado's case went to the jury Tuesday afternoon, another convicted Tampa murderer was being put to death by lethal injection. At 4:25 p.m. on Tuesday, according to observers, Oba Chandler was executed at the state prison in Rayford, Florida. Chandler was convicted in the 1989 deaths of Joan Rogers and her 2 daughters, their bodies found floating off the St. Pete Pier and also the Skyway after they had been killed and weighed down with blocks of concrete and tossed into the water. And another high-profile trial wrapped up today as well. Vincent Brown was found guilty of killing his girlfriend. You may remember this case from about 3 years ago. He locked his girlfriend in the trunk of her car. She called 911, but it was too late. He later killed her, and he went on trial starting last week. He was convicted earlier today, and the penalty phase in that trial will begin soon as well. And finally, the Occupy Wall Street movement took a violent turn this week in New York and elsewhere. On Tuesday, police in New York City carried out a violent raid on protesters in Zuccotti Park, the birthplace of the Occupy movement, where protesters have been camped out for the past 2 months. Dozens of arrests were made, including 2 city leaders who were at the park. Journalists and reporters covering the raid were also arrested and injured. On Twitter, reporters used the hashtag #MediaBlackout to spread the news of what was going on. According to the HuffingtonPost.com, Mayor Bloomberg later explained that the media was being kept away from Zuccotti Park for their own protection. Then, late Tuesday, a legal group representing the protesters obtained a court order that allowed the occupiers to return to Zuccotti Park, but this time they can no longer camp there or live there. The latest raid follows on the heels of 2 violent confrontations in Oakland, California and Portland, Oregon over the past week. Also, revamped efforts at Berkeley University, where an Occupy movement there has grown over the past day. Here in Tampa, a small group continues its Occupy Tampa vigil at Curtis Hickson Park. Aside from nuisance complaints from local residents and arrests for sleeping in the park, no major conflicts have been reported. Turning now to financial news, the markets here in the U.S. today finished down. Dow Jones Industrial Average finished down 190 points. The NASDAQ was down about 47. Oil prices settled over $100 a barrel again. We're back up to those old-time highs, and it's getting a little pricey for the oil markets as well, although gas is still remaining about the same, about $3.33 here in the Bay Area. Overseas, the Nikkei average in Japan was down about 78 points and change. In our market takeaways this Wednesday, the Transportation Safety Administration is facing another shutdown over budget disputes in Congress. Sound familiar? Well, it should. The last budget crisis in August and September closed down the TSA for days. And remember that congressional super committee that was created out of that same budget deal in August to avoid defaulting on all of our national debts? Well, tick-tock, time is almost up. In fact, 1 week from today is when their report is due. Their mission was to slash another $1.2 trillion in spending over the next 10 years. If they don't, automatic spending cuts go into effect. That would slice through the budget like a circular saw and that's using the term very lightly. Now for your on-the-docket forecast, don't know where our brief winter went to from last weekend when lows were in the 30s and 40s, and I was scraping frost off my car, but this week's highs are in the mid-80s, and lows barely dipping below the 70s each night. This trend will continue throughout the weekend, and it'll be hot and sticky throughout the rest of the week. And you're up to date at 5:06 with all the latest news. As I said, we have a packed show for you tonight, and we want to get right down to some of our topics as well. We want to hear from you throughout the hour as well. Post a message on our fan page at facebook.com/onthedocket. You can also follow me on Twitter at felixveganews, or send me an email, felixveganews@aol.com. You're listening to On the Docket live on hawkradio.com and WMNF Tampa 88.5 HD4. And jumping right into our first segment tonight on the docket, the spotlight on recent violence in YBOR City. For years, YBOR has struggled with its identity as a historical community and a popular night spot. YBOR has also had its peaks and valleys when it comes to safety. Depending on what end of 7th Avenue you were on, or what clubs you went to, you either had an amazing night of fun or possibly fell victim to a random robber, or in rare, tragic, but high-profile instances, even murder. But many business owners, and in particular the gay community, decided they wanted to take charge and make YBOR safer on all fronts. In 2007, the GAYBOR District Coalition was formed in an effort to revitalize YBOR and finally give the LGBT community a permanent home here in Tampa. But the GAYBOR founders found unexpected support from local business owners as well, who wanted to join in the reinvention of YBOR as an arts, business, and entertainment hub. Then came the support of Tampa Police Department, realizing that business owners were their strongest allies in reducing crime in YBOR. Carrie West is president of the GAYBOR District Coalition and co-owner of the MC Film Fest gift store here in YBOR. Him and his partner, Mark, have become the stewards of the LGBT community here in Tampa and the business community in YBOR. Together they have the ear of Mayor Bob Buckhorn, Tampa Police Chief Jane Castor, if not on speed dial, I would assume, Carrie.
Hey, welcome. Thank you.
And Carrie, thanks so much for joining me tonight. I have to start off with the closing of Club Empire. This was a huge deal. I was actually at the city council meeting a couple weeks ago in October actually, when this issue came up. Sharon Jones demanded Empire be shut down after her son was killed. Numerous business owners came forward. They said the same thing. How big of an impact did the environment at Empire have on other businesses in YBOR?
Well, thanks, Felix, on there. One of the biggest questions that we had out here is how are we going to keep YBOR the safe district that it has been and have we tried to work to accomplish. And with the Empire situation, it was actually kind of like a blood on the street when we actually had the murder down there. So things had to change. Yeah, when you have the police department on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday nights take majority of the force of the city police department in Tampa to work the area around Empire between 1 to 4 o'clock in the morning and have rubber bullets in their guns. This is not really exactly what we call for a safe area and what we need for Hillsborough County and especially in YBOR City here.
And it wasn't the image I remember growing up or going to college here in the early 90s and mid 90s, and it went up and down. There were times where it was safe, there was times it wasn't safe, and I remember going to the nightclubs and everything, and it was so, you'd have a great time, but then you had to worry about, okay, do I push it and stay till 2 o'clock, 2:45, 3 o'clock in the morning, or do I get out around 2? What had changed over the years, and why was there such a basically cyclical effect with crime in YBOR?
It's always been that way. The diversity down here in YBOR City has always had the variety of from cigar workers and people working from different shifts, also just working for the different entities, and also, as I said, there's also the feeling that there was this prohibition and underground of the ethnicity of YBOR City that helped make the district quite unique. So I meant the diversity is one of the nicest things about YBOR City. It's always had it. But when we came down in 1980, and of course the two clubs at that time that were very famous was a restaurant on the east side, which was the Colombian restaurant, and the other one was down to the El Goya, which had the 25-cent drink nights on Tuesday, and everyone from University of South Florida and University of Tampa visited and packed the house there every Tuesday night.
Well, so, it's such a great deal. Why wouldn't you come?
But then you do. Again, you consider yourself, you had to be out of there by at least around 2:30, because there were still gunshots in the middle of the night after you left there, possible robberies. And then I think the entertainment district, in making the challenges through Dick Greco's through his challenges of saying, let's make an entertainment area. And initially it was an arts area. It was a very bohemian style. And I think that's what, that manifested itself to keeping its nice and glory and the arts area. And also they have the Arts and Writers Guild and the YBOR Arts Associations and a lot of galleries up and down 7th Avenue. It was quite a very interesting place. That's now reproach, as we just have now the Hoffman Galleries just did the ribbon cutting this week. We're in there, and so that's right across from Empire. So I mean, this is major stays. So I think that why is it made? It's just through I think it's just growing and making its own direction. And Ybor City is kind of blazing its own trail.
And 2 weeks after the Empire shooting, there was another shooting at Club Manila, but that's actually 4 blocks outside what we consider, the 7th Avenue and 22nd Street area. But still, when a lot of the news reports were coming out, another shooting in Ybor, the stigma was still there. Why do you think that was dragged back into what happened to Empire? Is it because so many people live in that surrounding area of Ybor as opposed to the entertainment district itself?
Well, being, with the clubs, I mean, you start thinking you have around 48 clubs down in the area out here in a confined area. That's an awful lot of clubs coming out there, people having a good time after a few drinks, then they turn into something else. And it wasn't always drinks that a lot of the people had when they were leaving those clubs.
That's true.
Okay, so I would say that Club Manila, that could have happened, I said, in Temple Terrace. That could have happened in a lot of different areas. It could have happened outside the area. That was a sad situation out there that happened to be so coincidental at the same time that we had the shooting at the Club Empire. But you have to have a good, positive place to go. And I've been into Manila. It's very, very roomy. It's very clean, and it's maintained. It's just that some security measures have to be taken for the safety of all people of Tampa and also of Ybor City.
And you started, the GAYBOR Coalition started in 2007. What was your goal in starting the coalition, and how has it grown over the past few years?
Wow. 1993, with the going and changing of Ybor City, going from the arts area and going into this entertainment area, it was a kind of a known fact that they kicked most of the gays out of Ybor City. Out of the clubs, by taking them away, and the art galleries were shut down, and then it got to be high property values. And so things have changed, and 2007, it was actually the beginning of a renaissance, and that from 93 up until 2007, there really wasn't any gay clubs at all in Ybor City.
Yes, there was really no GLBT presence within the city, or even clubs or establishments for that matter.
No, it wasn't really identifiable. And so what we've done is we've come together with a group of us and said, you know what, there was 44 empty buildings in 2007 on 7th Avenue. So if you have 44 empty businesses, and it was going down at that time. The trend of the market was still good, and a good feeling with the market, but we also had a location over in St. Petersburg at the Suncoast Resort. So we had a store there. Second option was having a store here. So we came in as a second store, and announced Home Depot came and bought the Suncoast Resort and gave us 3 weeks to move out and shut it down and then tore it down. So that it's still a vacant land today. But in essence, what we want to do is to say that we want to have a presence. We didn't really realize what we were going to be doing in making that presence, but we talked to the neighbors and said, here's what we can do, here's what we can formulate. Our mission statement for GAYBOR District, which was kind of confusing some people, it wasn't changing Ybor City to GAYBOR City. It was actually going through its GAYBOR District in historic Ybor City, and it still is. That's how we have it on all of our literature. That's what we do in all of our postings. Now we're getting national and international stature. We just had major publications coming in, but we got together with just different businesses and said, I think we could bring a lot of economic value here to Tampa. I mean, when you start saying for the GLBT community, they say, okay, where do we want to go to? We want to go to Florida, but and Tampa's not even on the roadmap. It's not even a checklist. It's going to be Fort Lauderdale, Key West, Orlando. Then, of course, you were competing against the same areas, such as New Orleans and Atlanta and Houston. So what we had to do is make a presence and saying, here's where we are, here's what we have to offer, here's what we can work in. I'll tell you, the Hampton Inn jumped in, a lot of the different restaurants jumped in, and they saw the presence of what we wanted to do. And of course, everybody wants economic change as it was going down. If you have 44 empty businesses, that's not very good for the community.
And a lot of the businesses that you brought in and started, you have some of the nightclubs like G-Bar and Honeypot, and they really kind of became like the anchor of 7th Avenue and gave a new presence to it. And I noticed coming back down here and starting to go to some of the clubs that, a lot of people felt like they could come back to YBOR at night.
Yes.
And was that a big goal of the businesses as well?
Oh, very much so. Especially, GOAN is going to have its 5th anniversary coming up now this month here, next week, in fact. So they were kind of a pioneering effect. But that was a blighted area. The west end of YBOR City was the blighted area because you didn't want to make any challenges. And right next to that, you found yourself the old Badcock building, which was abandoned and broken down and a lot of smashed windows. And it looked like hell. That's the way it looked like. And so what we've done now, we made the venturing of meeting up. Here's what we wanted to accomplish. We met with the police chief, and we met with the assistants, and we also met with the staff in the area. And what we wanted to do is have a safety zone, not special rights, but special needed rights that needed to be implemented into Tampa Police Department. And it was very, very well done. More lighting. It's just little things.
Right.
We brought in they already had at least some of the horse patrols. They added that, and then also working the beats down on 8th Avenue and around the area.
Off of 7th as well.
Off 7th. At that time, we didn't really have a lot of businesses out there. Now we've incorporated right along all 7th Avenue. You're going to be finding from Bradley's on 7th to Honey Pot to Hamburger Mary's and all the way up and down the street. A lot of great places to go.
How important was it to partner with the police and bring the Tampa Police Department on board, not only with GAYBOR, but this whole revitalization effort that the businesses really wanted to do with YBOR City in general?
You have to go for the safety factor that you can't go out, leave your car, and then late night, and it doesn't have to be the early hours. This could be the midnight, and then be robbed or attacked or whatever. And we had to break that kind of that synergy of negative thought, and by bringing a positive effort, by saying, okay, let's watch and help everybody out. You have to walk in YBOR City. A lot of people don't like that. It's a destination point. You park your car, but you get to walk past all these different businesses every day. So it gets to be more like a family down here, and it's a more quaint community than most of any other area that we've known in the area. And it really is a gem. It's the heart gem of Tampa. And when explaining that out to anybody else and any of the politicians, they all agree. Where's YBOR City? Besides really lively entertainment, a good place to go. Now you can actually say the arts are coming back. Great restaurants, and then also a lot of nonprofits. The old Badcock building has had around $2.5 million renovation, and that is now home to the Metro Wellness and Community Center, which is again Lesbian Community Center, and also brought in BioScripts, a pharmacy, and we also are bringing in a primary care pharmacy, which is being funded and through the CDC. And with doing that, this is a full pharmacy now on 7th Avenue, which used to be in a blighted building, and that's going to be bringing 5 doctors and around 8 nurses, and it's going to be primary care right here for YBOR City.
And so not only that, you're creating jobs all along
creation.
the way.
A creation of job. In fact, it's almost we're at 100% right now of the rental spaces on actually the west end of YBOR City. And people are still calling about where can we go, what can we do, what can we get involved with. And the old, and not so much just being the aspect of just the gay community, but a lot of the, GAYBOR has 276 business members. And we have a map, and that's a lot. But over 2/3 of the membership is, as we call it, straight allies.
Right.
Businesses that say, we support your ideas, we want to work with you. It'd be a nonprofit, a bar, a restaurant, clothier, and so many different avenues, including a lot of real estate people, and also into the lawyers and corporations.
And with crime going down, I noticed the latest, there was an article in the St. Pete Times on Sunday that actually tracked crime going down in YBOR from 2001 to 2011. This year, up until October 31st, according to TPD and the Times, there was only 299 total crimes in YBOR City. I know everyone says about Empire and the other shootings that happened. Of course, there's going to be violence and crime everywhere. There were 69 violent crimes, and that's down from the highs of 2001, where there was 368 violent crimes in YBOR City. Do you guys feel the results?
Oh, very much so. We see actually the feeling of coming down here. That's where we want to go. We're working heavily with the YBOR City Development Corporation. They have a lot to offer and working and saying all the different committees about parking safety, about traffic, keeping everything down. I happen to be one of the Barrio Latino commissioners down here, and I was on the YBOR City Development Board for a long time. But it's keeping the safety, it's keeping the businesses going up there, trying to reinvest into YBOR City and all avenues. I mean, we have, in fact, one of the biggest investments we have right now going to happen is we are bringing snow machines into YBOR City.
That's awesome.
The December 17th and 18th, put it on your calendars, folks, because this is going to be a chance for you to drive through snow and also walk through snow. And the machines are coming from Walt Disney World over in Disney, and they're going and collaborating with getting everything done for all the decorating and everything done on 7th Avenue. It's going to be just the candle bridges will be glorified, the garland will be lit. I mean, this is an all-out effort to say you're going to have a great time in this this is recession. I don't care what they said. They didn't want to ever say the big depression.
Right.
But a lot of the areas we know, I mean, we're talking about in East Tampa because I happen to be just getting off the hoof of working some politics myself. But we have 20 to 22% unemployment, East Tampa. What's this about, folks? I mean, this is a reality check that we have to go through there. And again, so law enforcement has to be acquired. You have to have partnership with economics and also with corporations and private enterprises to make things happen. And it is happening. And that's a wonderful thing about what's going on in this area in the east part of Tampa.
And is that the big...
and crime levels are down.
Right. And it's in terms of the... in terms of what YBOR is going to become, and how do you see it evolving even more in the next couple of years?
Well, we're going to see more hotels coming in, and we got to do infrastructure buildup. And what I mean by that, we're going to be doing in individual housing, multi-housing, and also individual homes, and also condominiums. And it's going to be, we're in a warehouse.
Where is that actually going to fit into?
That's going to be fitting in almost right in where's right down 4th, 5th, and 3rd Avenue. These are a lot of constructions and old corporate Quonsets. That's what they are. And when you see the big bid right now, on going down Adamo Drive down here, going out there, right, just an IKEA's being built, and it's doing a great job for helping promote the area also here. But we have metal sheds that are being redone through a moving YBOR City in the right direction. They're going to have them be repainted with murals. I mean, this is undertaking from YBOR Arts. A lot of individuals are taking part. General David Scott's at hand in that, and he's retired, coming in to help out in love of YBOR City. So we got a lot of things on our plate, a lot of things that are happening, and we got a lot of progress than things for people to do. And the nice thing about it is we're filling up the hotels. We are looking about different avenues we don't want just bars coming into YBOR City. We're looking for retail. And right now the biggest thing is high tech and internet tech companies and digital. Florida's coming in. We have a couple others right now with a logistics company with C.H. Robinson just moving in with around 120 jobs. But you have to be careful. There's a balancing point. You got to really be careful because you can turn the city of YBOR City into what was Harbor Island, a little entity of retail and wholesale, and then it turned into an office complex.
Right.
And now people are coming down to YBOR City. They're not coming to see the office buildings. They're coming down to see YBOR City as the quaint village and the historic factories, the cigar factories. They want to see cigar rollers, and they also want to see and go and eat at the restaurants, and also just take in the sights of what we have down here.
And so you don't want to see necessarily, even though the economic development is great for YBOR City, you don't want to see it overrun and lose the inherent charm.
Right. At least the first floor. First floor levels are very, very concentrated to the fact that first floor has always been known as retail, and it always has been that way almost in most major cities. But it's a very slight area right now with this kind of economic times. Do we get at least someone coming in and to take over the properties to maintain them? Because Tampa, city of Tampa is still on the hook for Central YBOR.
Yeah, that is true.
How do you
see the new Encore project that's going in between downtown and YBOR? How do you see that as a link?
Oh wow! What this is going to be really a sublet going in and adding great value and also great positioning for people moving in to want to be back into the downtown areas and living in instead of the burbs, they're going to be coming on down there into the urban area. They want to live right downtown, and I see that that's going to be a great gesture. What's going on with the retailing and coming into the areas? There are going to be new modern type buildings that are coming in. It's going to have a motif of old companies. But we're not going to be taking away the people from the malls. This is going to creativity time. This is what we're about, is creativity time with the arts and thinking about what's going on to the future, the needs of the people, and also then again, also the housing, making sure that for downtown living, that you're very, very, very much an urban outfit.
And also being able to, for more of a community, for being able to walk from like downtown through Encore into Ybor City,
And
more like of a New York type of feel.
It'll be definitely community orientated, but I think we have a lot of new buildings coming in, a lot of great housing. But again, the nice thing about it is whenever there's new housing and a lot of people, guess what that brings? Great food.
Right.
And I'm one that loves great food, I'll tell you that.
Lastly, people coming to Ybor, what's your best advice for them, either visitors or even people that come to, that live in Tampa and want to come to Ybor? What do you want them to see when they come to Ybor and come to the businesses?
Well, they're going to see one thing that we've maintained in the Ybor City Development Corporation and also in Ybor City is you're maintaining a clean city. So you're not getting a stench environment when you walk down in the sidewalks in the early morning. They have a cleanup team that's coming and helping when you walk down the street, you see is a nice, clean, maintained, very small, quaint area. So I think that when you come down here, please come down here and take advantage and see what we do have to offer, because there are great avenues and great things to see. But yes, no, I see Ybor City's only growth is going to be very, very popular, and it's not just the parking lots and bars. You'll be seeing some there's 3 brand new restaurants that just opened up right now, that just opened up. The Luigi's just opened up right now. We have
I saw that over the Don Vicente.
Don Vicente, wonderful. We were there for lunch, and the food was excellent. Redoing the Don Vicente, they've redone for a very boutique inn. We have the styles coming in right now. We have a Mediterranean restaurant that just opened up in the corner, Laughing Cat restaurant, and then we have a new steakhouse which is venturing in, and then Jimmy John's, which is going to be downstairs in Central Ybor.
Right.
So there's a lot of
different.
This is diversity, and we love it. Plus the Hoffman Galleries right there down in the across from the
Excellent.
Empire.
Carrie West, thank you so much for joining me.
You bet. We're
today.
glad
Appreciate
anytime.
it. Hope we'll have you definitely come back on. I know you got to get somewhere to another fantastic event you're going to go to tonight.
Tampa Bay and Company's got some great events coming on. We just had part of the RNC yesterday. They came in touring Ybor City, gave them a great tour. They love for the venuing of what's going on for the upcoming 2012 convention here in Tampa. So, we're working all
That's
the time
gonna
with
be big.
great avenues and security measures again.
Right.
Well, great. I appreciate you having me on.
No, anytime.
Okay.
Glad to have you back. Thanks, Gary.
You bet.
And with that, you're listening to On the Docket live on hawkradio.com and WMNF Tampa 88.5 HD4. And right now, we're going to switch gears a little bit. Once again this week, law and sports are front and center in the headlines. Attorney Keith GOAN is here with me now on the docket. Keith, good evening.
How you doing, Felix?
Good. Glad to have you here. Let's get right to it. We're going to recap some of our sports headlines real quick, and then we're going to get to the one story everyone's been talking about and why you're here today, the Penn State scandal. It's really gotten, for lack of a term, out of control at this point. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. It's all, no matter what you do, no matter what radio station, TV channel,
It's all there.
Internet, it's there.
Yeah. So real quick, in sports, this past week, USF took on Syracuse. Finally, a win for the Bulls, 37-7. That brings the Bulls to 5-4. UF fell to South Carolina. It's their 5th loss of the season and one of their losingest seasons in some time. They lost 17-12. FSU took on Miami. They won 23-19. Coming up this week, USF takes on UM right here at home. Another great in-state rivalry. Saturday at 3:30, catch the game on ESPNU. That's back-to-back in-state games for University of Miami, which was a bit unusual for their schedule. UF is taking on Furman at home in Gainesville on Saturday at 1. FSU takes on Virginia at home. All the big teams are home this weekend. The FSU game Saturday at 7:30. FSU actually went to 7-3 with their win last week over Miami. Finally, a team from Florida back in the top 25, so good to see that. Also over in the NFL, the Bucs took on the Texans. Big blowout for them, 37-9. The Bucs are now 4-5. The big observation from Sunday's game: lack of effort. Not that we could watch the game thanks to the blackout. We talked about that last week. I talked about that on Fox 13's Good Day this past weekend. Hopefully, the bill introduced by Senator Mike Fasano will eventually go into effect, and we can end the blackouts here in Florida. But zero effort again, like I said, on the Bucs' part to stop the Texans. Raheem Morris said Monday that the team is ready to take on Green Bay next. Well, Green Bay crushed the Vikings Monday Night Football 45 to 7. So we're going to see how that goes on Sunday. But like I said, now on to the latest in the Penn State scandal, and not one but two disturbing interviews with Jerry Sandusky came out on Monday. First, it was an interview from October 1987 that Sandusky gave to NBC News. In it, he talks about not only enjoying, quote, personal contact with young children and people through the children at his now tarnished charity Second Mile. Then, on Monday night's broadcast of NBC's Rock Center with Brian Williams, an equally disturbing interview with Bob Costas and Sandusky's attorney. Just some of the quick highlights. There was about a 10-minute interview. I know I was shocked. Keith, you saw that. Why would his attorney allow him to speak on national television in basically an open forum with Bob Costas?
Well, as you know, one of the things you have to look at that as a defense attorney, and you say, most attorneys are saying what you're saying. Why would anybody let their client speak? And when you meet with a client in a defense case, you try to get all the information from them. So the only conclusion I can make after seeing what he said and listening to that interview 3 or 4 times, comparing it with the indictment, is that this defense attorney has to have said to himself, listen, Mr. Sandusky, we're not going to be able to say you weren't there in these locations where these people are putting you at. There's too much evidence, there's too much eyewitness testimony that places you in these showers, that places you in these areas, that places you in the basements of these rooms with these kids. So now we have to figure out what's the best way to do it. Now, the way they're going about it, totally, I disagree. But I only can understand that there's some type of planning. They got together and they decided, let's go ahead and say, as far-fetched as this may sound and as disturbing, you use that word twice, and that's
right.
Really the word you have to use. As disturbing as this is, why were you here? What were you doing? And then we're going to try to explain this away. It makes no sense. And anybody who listens to that is just going to say, are you kidding me? You're going to let this individual talk? And now he's basically admitted in this interview, which is going to come into evidence if it ends up going to trial, that he was there. He put himself at all the places where these victims are saying he was at.
Right, because one of the answers he gave to Bob Costas' question was that he was showering and horsing around when the incident in particular where Mike McCreary, the coach that was actually the grad assistant at the time, he saw apparently Sandusky engaged in intercourse with about a 10-year-old boy in the showers. It was very graphic in the grand jury's report how he described it. And Sandusky actually addressed that one head on, saying that they were showering and horsing around, that the boy turned on all the showers, they were sliding across the floor, and the snapping or slapping that McQuarrie actually interpreted as being related to the sexual intercourse was snapping a towel, and it was horseplay. It just boggles the mind why he would even go that far and try and explain the actions that someone else saw.
Right, and at this point in time, it's very premature for them to go ahead and basically, even if this is going to be their defense. If I sit with a client, I say, listen, if this thing goes to trial, we're going to have a defense. This is going to be our defense. We're definitely not going to put it out there in the media right now. We're definitely going to wait and see what else comes out. There's only a fraction of evidence that we know. Remember, the grand jury documents, and again, his lawyer may have more information than we have, but the grand jury
right now,
documents...
all we know that's out there is that one grand jury report.
And it's a summary report of what they actually, the evidence that they knew. And some of the stuff that we've seen now today, in anticipation of coming on, I did a little more research, and now we see that McQuarrie is now saying some stuff that's not in the grand jury indictment that supposedly is going to come out in the future. Basically, he stopped them.
Right.
Because, one of the big things was, if you isolate that incident, because that's the one that basically started the ball rolling for the most part, this issue when McQuarrie says he saw him, and most people were outraged at McQuarrie for not stopping him. Most people were outraged at Paterno for not getting involved. That stems a lot from this issue with McQuarrie and this victim number one, I guess, for lack of a better term. But what we look at and we see is that they understand there's things we have to look at legally. As a defense attorney, you look at this case, as appalled as I would be, and I can tell you, and I don't handle not only child abuse cases, much less child sex cases. I don't handle them. However, in looking at this and evaluating as a defense attorney, we have to put our defense attorney hat on. We have to say, what would we do? In this case, if you look at that, McQuarrie is saying, and this was 10 years ago, 13 years ago, is when it was done. Now, we have to look at different things. Everybody keeps asking me, what's the statute of limitation on this type of crime? Now, it's very important to understand, and again, without understanding Pennsylvania necessarily, but here in Florida, let's just assume this was here, you have the only time that statute of limitations would not attach would be in a capital case.
Right.
And a sex with a minor under 10, under 12 is a capital case, as you know, and therefore a statute wouldn't apply. Now, the question becomes, I say to my client, we're going to say you were there, we're going to say that McQuarrie saw you, we're going to say that you know he was there, and we're going to say that you were horseplaying, you were slapping, you were wrestling, you were turning on the showers, you were doing slip and slides across the shower with this boy, as As much as that, and as crazy as that sounds, that a grown man would be doing that, where's the criminal nature in that? Now, after 12 years, 13 years.
Right, but then the flip side of that is you have this is not just one incident.
Right, I'm saying isolating the incident.
Isolating the one incident,
right.
But then we're talking about this went on from 2008, 2009. There were documented incidents, according to the grand jury report, where Sandusky was taking boys to certain sporting events. One of them being the Outback Bowl here in Tampa, another the Alamo Bowl out in Arizona. The feds today are saying that they're looking into it. Crossing state lines with a minor child, is that where the federal investigation could possibly head?
Absolutely, because it has to be, for the feds to get involved on these type of cases, it has to go across state lines, and they're going to get involved. They're just because of the nature of the case, because where the state may fail based on some statutory issues, the feds can pick it up.
Right.
So the feds are going to get involved. But again, Felix, remember, we all, in these type of cases, the biggest reason for not getting a conviction from the state is usually victims not cooperating or victim statements not being corroborated by some other sort of evidence. Now, you say to yourself, 9 children, 9 victims, they all have these stories. Yeah, they all have these stories. However, when you get in as a defense attorney, it's very controversial right now to be this guy's defense attorney, because how can you defend this guy is what everybody would ask. But if you take on that responsibility, you have to do it. And in order to do it, you have to go through the case-by-case basis, victim by victim, and you have to say, okay, let's look at this particular incident. They have to prove that, number one, they have to prove, in this case, that this boy was 10.
Right.
That's one of the first elements to make it a capital case, to get the statute going. So, and McQuarrie has to be able to ID him. If you want to use McQuarrie's testimony, he's got to be able to say, yeah, that's him. So you have to start putting holes in that as a defense attorney immediately.
Is this the same kid that he saw?
Is it the same kid he saw? Is this the same date? How do you know? Tell me exactly. So now that goes.
So it gets down to specific dates and places as opposed to just the generality of the acts that he was committing.
And it goes along with in a jury trial. If you have the right jury, like we all try to pick, the jury has to look at it and throw the emotions out, which is very difficult. But as we know, in the case nobody wants to talk about anymore, the recent case
I'll say Casey Anthony.
That case. Think about it. All the evidence was against her. Nobody believed that they could walk this girl, and they did. Different kind of case. Here you have victims involved that are going to come in and speak.
Right.
Totally different kind of case.
Yeah, and I was talking about this in class I was teaching on Monday night, where in the Casey Anthony case you had a set of bones. We didn't have a manner of death. We didn't have necessarily a cause of death when you whittle it down. But in this case, you have what we believe are live victims. One of the comments that Sandusky's attorney made to Costas on Monday night was that the charges won't hold up. He expects to have a number of the kids come forward and say it never happened. Is he going to be able to? I mean, the grand jury report is very general in terms of they identified him as victim 1, victim 2. Do you think that he's had access to these victims?
Well,
already?
I saw that portion of the interview, and based on body language and based on what he said, I believe he has, unless he's really good at what he's trying to do. Right. I mean, we know that he could be that well, but I think that he basically is alluding to the fact, or at least he wants us to believe that he's had contact with them, and that hey, listen, at this point they know, in the public eye, there's nothing you can do publicly to shed a bright light or a positive light on Sandusky at this point. That's why I don't understand why they let him talk.
Right, and that's what, because you and I talked about a little bit yesterday about this case. Basically, not only it's going to be trial prep going forward and getting all the documents, interviewing the witnesses, deposing people, whether or not it's going to be a federal investigation. But at this point, does it come down to more damage control than anything else? And in damage control in this case, obviously, where are you going to find a jury in this case, first and foremost, that hasn't heard about this? Right, in Penn State, and
especially there. So that's number one. So you're not normally, when you're doing damage control, or when you choose as a defense attorney, if there's a case that's worthy of news coverage, and you choose to either do a press release, I mean, it's almost unheard of to let your client speak this early in the game. I mean, let's be honest. But
usually you're the one getting
I'm the
out
one
front,
speaking. I'm the one calling a press conference. I'm the one releasing a statement as the attorney for my client, so that way it can't be used against him. Now, when I do that, it's usually because the very simple reason we all do that is to try to get the jury on our side from the beginning. Because let's be honest, even though we say we try to pick a fair and impartial jury that hasn't heard about the case, a case that's newsworthy, everybody's heard about the case. So it's very hard to not get a jury that has heard about it. So when we do that as a defense attorney, we are trying to sway the jury on our side from day one. We sure aren't letting this guy, our client, talk and basically enrage the folks, the public, because the statements he made are ridiculous. course, playing
They're
with
horrible.
the kids. I'm a grown man. I'm playing. I like it. I have an affiliation, and then and I'm sure you have it on your there to talk about. But the one statement that is the most disturbing is when he was asked point blank about his, and I may misquote it. I don't want to misquote it. You probably can say it. His attraction to little boys.
Right. And then that was one of the other things he said, that I shouldn't have showered with those kids. That's what hits me the most. He was asked whether he was a pedophile. He said no. And this is, I think, the statement you were talking about. He was asked, "Are you sexually attracted to underage boys?" He hesitated, said sexually attracted, and then went on to say, "I enjoy being around young people, but not sexually attracted." I mean, obviously a jury's going to decide, but just based on my experience as a prosecutor, your experience as a defense attorney, but that's pretty damning statement to make. And the hesitation, and also reading into the way that he said it, it's not so much as just the words.
And that's the problem, and that's why you don't. No matter what the defense is going to be, that now has been memorialized on tape. The state at some point will be able to introduce it, because not to get legalese, but we all know that you would say, well, why? How can they use that against him? Well, it's a statement that he made.
Involuntary statement.
And it's an admission by him. It's if they're trying to introduce it as a hearsay, yes, but the bottom line is you can always, they're getting that statement in.
Right.
So playing that statement for the jury, any logical person who sees him, and everybody knows, and the state will do a good job of telling them this, but everybody knows that when you're asked a question and you're kind of nervous or you don't know what to say, you're going to repeat it.
Right,
and then it's like 101, and it doesn't even look like he even talked to his client before he let him talk.
Well, even that's one of my friends, actually, I think on Facebook, or one of my friends in the media asked me. It just seems like he wasn't even prepared, and I'm like, I don't think he was. I mean, I know when I have people on my show, or even when I do appearances on TV, we trade our questions. We're given the questions. We're prepared. Like, okay, because you really don't want to blindside your guests if you're not doing shock radio or some sort of gotcha moment on TV. But this just sounded like, I mean, Costas had his list of questions, went down them, and this guy did not know how to even deflect or even get around some of the questions he was being asked.
And I don't think, first of all, I don't think he even would have, if he decided to let him talk, I don't think he even had enough time to prepare him.
Right.
With what's been going on. And how could you let how could you let a client talk? If you're going back to the basic question, how do you let a client talk when you don't have all the evidence? You don't even know what, because quite frankly, unless you had an agreement. If I was bringing a client on to talk to you, Felix, and I said, hey, Felix, I'm going to let you interview my client, but here's a list of questions you can ask, nothing more. And you agree to do that, and we know that happens all the time?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, fine. Now I've prepped my client on those questions, and those are the only 10 questions you can ask. He's got the answers, he's done. But I don't even think that happened in this situation, because I think Costas asked the hard questions. He asked the questions he had to know, but they weren't surprising questions.
Right.
But at the end of the day, and the reason why I asked when he said to him, do you feel you're culpable? Remember that question he asked him? And he said, I don't know what you mean by that. That shows me he had no idea that question was coming.
No, and there was a couple other things about whether or not he was not only a pedophile, but his pointed out that you must be the most persecuted and unluckiest man in the world, to be in the situation that you're in without having done something. Let me ask you this question: in terms of, we've seen Penn State and how they reacted, and the fans and the whole State College, Pennsylvania community was very visceral about Joe Paterno being fired, the whole situation as it unfolded, and one of the judge that actually set bond in Sandusky's case was a volunteer in the Second Mile charity that he worked for, and set his bond at $100,000. When it went through everything this weekend, he's facing 40 counts of child sexual abuse, looking at 277 years in prison, and his bond was only set at $100,000.
Felix, well, first of all, there's an issue with that. You would have thought, that judge would have accused himself from the bond hearing just for being involved in the charity.
One would think that
you would think, and we know that that's unless the state makes that motion, they may not have known that he was involved. So unless the state makes the motion, the judge should have made the motion on his own. That's number one. Number two, if you look at these crimes, and again, I apologize for not knowing the bond statute or the bond structure, in Pennsylvania, but if you looked at it in Florida, even if you put an average of $10,000 per count on these cases, and they're going to be more, because on a capital case, first of all, there's an issue whether or not he's entitled to a bond on that capital case.
Right, especially here in Florida. And that was an interesting point, because in Pennsylvania, I did research this, the maximum that he could get for the first-degree felonies, which is the actual contact that he made, the sexual contact allegations, is a first-degree felony is 20 years max. And so, and when you were talking about that, I was thinking, well, that's a bit odd because a capital sexual battery in Florida, that's a life sentence automatically. And so right there was a disparity between Florida and how tough they are on these statutes. But if you were either the Attorney General, I'm thinking from the Attorney General's standpoint, would you move to get the case out of State College and get a change of venue as early as possible?
I think you have to. I think you have to, because you never know. And again, this is the tip of the iceberg, what the information we're receiving. You never know at this point, because let's be honest, what is the city? What is the town? What is that? It's Penn State College. That's what it is. So the demise of Penn State College and the football program, let's call it what it is. The football program is the gem of that school. The football program, I don't know the numbers, you may know, brings all the money into that school. And Joe Paterno,
billions of dollars
exactly.
They're bringing in.
And so let's be honest, while yes, they provide a good education for their students, at the end of the day, the football program is it. So we don't know who's going to protect the football program. Even now, we've seen already the slight evidence of any happenings with the state, with the police, with the campus. We know what's been going on, and we know the only reason for that was to protect the football program. So the Attorney General or whoever's going to handle it needs to remove it out of there, and that's why I think that they could possibly seek the federal assistance and say, hey guys, come get this. District Attorney, the Assistant U.S. Attorney, come get this. Let's take it. I don't know where they'll take it, but they can pretty much take it anywhere if it goes federal.
Right, and that was one of the concerns that I had, because just hearing that about the judge with the bond situation, and also one of the other people that was indicted, although on a misdemeanor count, in covering up what was going on. He was the executive vice president of the university who was in charge of the college police. And again, talk about willful blindness was the best word I could think of to describe the whole entire situation. But it just seems like they're not going to be able to either, certainly the state, now that they've been accused of taking down essentially this powerhouse institution and dismantling not only the career of Joe Paterno, the president of the university, the vice president on down. We don't even know who's next on the chopping block anymore. But it just seems like it would be a good idea for them to get out of there as soon as possible. And it affects like pretrial rulings, anything they can do to possibly gut the state's case. Or the flip side would be can the defense even get a fair trial in this situation?
In this situation, I think that it needs to be removed. It needs to be removed quickly, because as you say, we have the individuals who are involved. They go all the way from a low. Look at what you have. You go from a janitor who works at the school part-time to the president of the university, are all somewhat involved in this scandal and the cover-up of it. Now, the question becomes, most people are asking, and a lot of people are upset. I know Franco Harris he got fired from his job because he kind of backed Joe Paterno. I know, what's his name from Demi Moore's husband? Austin Kutcher or whatever.
Oh,
he tweeted
God.
about, so what I'm saying is
Ashton Kutcher.
These people are getting the public, when they say they support Joe Paterno, the question becomes to Joe Paterno is very simple in my eyes, and I may be wrong, and again, I may take slack for this comment, but the old man, let's call it what it is, he's 72 years old at the time, he gets a phone call and says, hey, this is what I saw. If this is all we know, he goes to his AD and says go. The president goes. They go to law enforcement, because we know that law enforcement got involved then.
Right.
Law enforcement chose not to file a charge against this guy. That's what Joe Paterno knew. Now the question becomes: did Joe Paterno have more information? If that's all the information he had, I don't think he's getting a fair shake. Thing is, everybody says he had to know more. Maybe he didn't. He's the football coach.
And that was one of the things that our friend Tim Owens was talking about last week. Like, what did Paterno know? And I think now that the Department of Justice is getting involved, Department of Education is getting involved in looking at what was Paterno's role in this. And it begs the question: was this brought to him multiple times? He's saying that, I only knew about the one incident. I did what I was supposed to. I followed the reporting laws that were in place at the time. But then, as this more and more unfolds, it was like, is it really likely that Paterno was that isolated? And he may be. He may completely go to his office every day, go out on the training field, go to the football games, and that's it, and go home to his wife. But it really begs the question, did he know more based on the web that's already been uncovered on that campus and within the football program and all the way up the university structure?
And it could have been, and that's why I say I'd like to wait before I throw Paterno into the bus.
Right.
I'd like to wait, because I understand the way it works, being a big Florida State fan, and understanding how Bobby Bowden in his later years, how he was protected from things. He was basically ceremonial. Now remember, even 12 years ago, Paterno's what, 84 now?
Yeah.
So he was 72 years old. He was, Sandusky was being groomed to be the next head coach. This all, at this time, is kind of when Paterno said, you're not going to be the head coach. So we know that he may have known a little more, but let's wait and see what he knew, because if all he knew was
That
this,
one incident
this
that was
assistant
reported.
comes and says, hey, I saw some stuff that was not right. He goes to law enforcement, because if the state attorney decided not to charge him, how can you blame Joe Paterno? He's not going to continue to, say, hey, we want to fire you. What are you doing? Go and keep on calling the state and saying, why aren't you charging? It's just like any crime. If I come to you and the police investigates it, and I say, hey, Felix, this happened. You turn it over to your supervisor, police investigate it, and you say, hey, by the way, everything, he's been cleared. I'm not going to keep bringing it up. But the question is, did Paterno know more? If he knew more, then yes. Then he needed to get him out of that program, because he was utilizing that program in furtherance of this crime.
Exactly.
And that was the problem. He was using these kids wanting to go and be part of the football game, wanting to go and be part of Penn State, wanting to go see this. I mean, what 10-year-old that's in that city wouldn't want to go to the locker room?
Yeah, exactly, and you take advantage of the whole situation. Obviously Sandusky, preyed on these kids from what we can tell from the grand jury report, mostly through Second Mile, and the whole allure of like, look what I can give you. There were a lot of the accounts where they came from broken homes, they came from bad families. They really had no family structure as well. But real quick, I want to get to some of our Facebook comments. Robin Fuson stated clearly from a trial aspect he's presumed innocent, but what attorney lets his client run off at the mouth like Sandusky? Again, talking about that interview. Charlie Moresi commented, when in all actuality we make up our minds before hearing all the facts. I know I have. I think he's guilty. I also think all those who knew about it and didn't call the police are guilty too. But like you said, the court of public opinion is very different from the court of law that we have to practice in every day. So I mean, this is going to be. I fell into the Casey Anthony trial to, working over at being on Fox 13. Like, this is like, I start the show and then this all breaks. This is going to be, we're talking about this for a long time.
I think the final thing on this is for anybody who's listening to understand, as a defense attorney, the first thing we always tell clients is, number one, if there's an issue and you're being investigated, don't talk to law enforcement. And sure, why would we let them talk to the media?
The media,
I mean, it doesn't make any sense. It's like 101, defense attorney 101. Don't talk about it. Let me deal with it, and we'll go from there.
And that's going to be one of the stories that that's going to be the big story, I think, going forward, is why do you let him do that, and what the damage that's going to have on his trial, and whether or not other people are going to start coming forward now. Because I know one of the victims had already come forward because very distressed about the fact that he was already denying this, and he was changing the factual scenario. Well, maybe it was this, maybe it was we were just horsing around. And so I think we're going to have a lot more people. I think the numbers up to date, 10 more people have come forward that the grand jury is looking into, and the attorney general. So definitely explosive story that we're going to keep following here on the docket. I want to get to a couple of other quick legal headlines from, as we know, every week. My favorite segment, you can't make this stuff up, the legal insanity from across the country and around the world. And the courtroom, you see it every day, just like I do. And a couple of the stories that I was following this week. One of them was a tragic story out of suicide from Illinois, another life lost because of alleged bullying. This is a topic I'm going to be dealing with in January here on the docket, as well as school starts again. It's become a big issue across the country and also in the state of Florida. This one was tragic. 10-year-old Ashlyn Connor hung herself in a closet. She was found by one of her siblings, according to a report on CBS News. She reportedly told her mother that other kids in her class have been bullying her for years. Ashlyn's mother, Stacey Connor, thought her children were strong, according to CBS and the HuffingtonPost.com. According to Ashlyn's mom, kids at her East Illinois school had called her, among other things, a slut. Ashlyn's ugly. She's fat. Once again, we talk about the Penn State story as well. If you see something, say something. I mean, that's the golden rule after 9/11. We heard that a lot, in terms of being vigilant and being mindful of what's going on in the world. But in these bullying stories, I mean, I see at least one a week where these kids are taking their own lives at such young ages.
Yeah, I don't understand. I read that story, and the first thing that came to my mind is, how does a 10-year-old even know to go hang herself, or how does that even cross their mind? And you realize that society is what it is, and this bullying is driving this 10-year-old to hang herself. Yeah. And the day before, 2 days before, she'd asked her mom to be homeschooled, and her mom said no, because she's, if your child is doing that, there's a reason. And obviously, but you would never, I can't even, I don't have children, but I have niece and nephew, one 16 and 17 now, but when they were 9 and 10 years old, I couldn't even fathom the fact that they would understand how to commit suicide or what suicide even was. But it's a different,
yeah, and that's what's so disturbing about those stories, and why I wanted. I brought it up a couple of weeks ago when I first started the show, and a couple of the guests I'm having on, and probably in January, a couple of school teachers of a friend, or sisters of a friend of mine, and just to really highlight some of the things that they have to look for, not only in elementary school, but even in high school, sometimes in college, but really the small kids. These are the worst stories. I mean, any suicide death is tragic, but when like you said, when you're getting down to kids that are 9, 10, 11 years old and are having to endure this and make a cry for help, and then they end up having to take their own lives. We hope that that's something that we can at least try and address here on our show. This is another lesson in how you should never carry a gun to school, speaking of kids, or for that matter, if you're taking care of your 6-year-old nephew. Stop and think, where are the parents in this situation? When 6-year-old Marshawn Means allegedly told his uncle, the same uncle that allegedly shot and killed him, he didn't want to play a video game or cops and robbers, that's when police say, ready for this, his 14-year-old uncle said, "I hate you," and shot him in the chest. On top of that, little Marshawn had sickle cell anemia, which makes anyone suffering from the disease way more likely to bleed out. Luckily, Marshawn is expected to make a full recovery. Still makes you wonder why a 14-year-old, one, has access to a gun, and two, is taking care of a 6-year-old in this day and age.
When you hear the uncle, you immediately think he's going to be older. Then you hear the age 14, and you realize, where are the parents? What's going on here?
Right. I was like, why is your uncle only 14 years old, too? And then another story I found, the lead prosecutor in the Casey Anthony trial, speaking of Casey Anthony, Jeff Ashton, released a new book on Tuesday. Ashton, of course, was the same prosecutor that resigned the same night that Casey Anthony was acquitted, the same Jeff Ashton that appeared on the morning news shows the next morning. I remember he was on the Today Show, literally had to have left Orlando right when the verdict came out. They gave their press conference. 12 hours later, he was sitting on the couch with Matt Lauer. Now in his new book, Imperfect Justice, Ashton takes direct aim at defense attorney Jose Baez, calling him schmarmy, making surprising claims about the strategy of the state's case. For example, that he shouldn't have been a death penalty case. Thought that Casey Anthony was offered a plea agreement close to the end of the trial and would not even acknowledge her lawyers at that end, and also blaming the jurors for being more concerned with movie nights and meals. I kind of took offense to that one, because I know the more I've lectured about the Casey Anthony trial here at HCC and also USF, the one thing that people get, and especially I was surprised by students get this more than the adults, is that the jurors did their job. And as much as we think and believe that Casey Anthony was guilty and responsible for Kaylee Anthony's death, that they actually followed the law. When you look at the jury instructions about, like you said, not letting your personal feelings come into play, not hating the attorney, not holding other external factors against the defendant, they really did what they were supposed to do. They looked at the evidence, decided that the state didn't prove not only first-degree murder but anything else. In this case, I think it was, for Ashton to come out and blame the jurors. One of the other comments that he wrote in the book was the fact that he was concerned from the beginning that they didn't appear to be paying attention and they didn't have some sort of worldview that he was looking for, in the jury selection. But picking a jury, a lot of it's gut instinct, a lot of it's how you relate to the people. So a lot of the jurors that came forward in the coming days, I know none of them spoke since that first week after the trial. They explicitly said the state did not prove its case beyond a reasonable doubt, and that's why they ended up acquitting her, even though it was painful for them to do.
Yeah. End of the day, he picked the jury. He was part of the process. He can attack whoever he wants. He's upset, and the fact that he's saying that these jurors aren't talking, the fact that he's the only one, really, if you look at it monetarily, other than Baez getting paid for defense, who's benefited from this trial?
And also
Jeff Ashton. And for him to take a shot at the jurors of our county, of our Bay Area, because remember, these are Clearwater, Pinellas jurors. They did what the defense usually really wants to happen. A lot of times we're at a disadvantage. Let's be honest. They did what every defense attorney can ask for. Hey, follow the law, listen to the evidence. And the bottom line is Ashton and his group over there decided to overcharge this case. He's right about seeking the death penalty.
And I was surprised.
He did that from the beginning, Felix. He overcharged this case, and they should have never done it. If they didn't overcharge this case would have been a plea.
Right, and we talked about that on Good Day when the case was going on, afterwards, because the state attorney's office, out of deference to them, active case, we don't want to comment on it, and basically I focus more on the law and where the case was progressing. But I was surprised to see him say that, because they were so bent on going after the death penalty. And Dr. G, the medical examiner, she couldn't even express what the manner of death was. We know that as it came out, and I don't want to get off topic on Casey Anthony, but it was just the timing was perfect for that to come out as well. So it's going to be interesting to see. I was surprised how quickly he turned around a book after the verdict came out.
I mean, he's had it in the works. He's had it in the works from the beginning. This guy had a plan from the beginning. He took this case on. He was supposed to retire. He took this case on, and I think he had a personal agenda. And he's saying now that they shouldn't assault the death penalty. I think he was integral part in that. And I think you may see now with this book somebody from the state attorney's office in Orlando saying, "Wait a minute." He's the one
That's
that
what I'm looking for.
Don't throw the stones at us now that you're gone. Listen, you're the one that sought the death penalty. You're the one. We wanted to do this. You know, the only interesting thing I thought there that I was different was, to me, would be interesting to see what actually was offered in the trial.
Yeah, that's what I want to see,
that Baez said, "Hey, you better take this deal," and she said no, because it takes a lot of, you know what, to not take a deal, and ended up in her favor because they walked her.
And that's good. I want to see what the reaction is going to be from within his own office. Two more quick stories, and then we're going to wrap it up here. I don't know if you heard about this one yesterday. A gentleman calling 911 67 times. Last week we talked about a woman in Lehigh Acres calling the Port Authority in Lee County, complaining about her husband working too late, then threatening to blow up some planes. Tim and I thought that wasn't a good idea, but this week, don't call 911 67 times. Yes, 67 times, and keep hanging up. That's what Clarence McDonald is accused of doing, along with his girlfriend, Bonnie Martinez. Tuesday, police eventually caught up with the pair and tracked them down at Interstate 4 and 301 and arrested them, and rightly so, because it's a bit much. Not to mention the dispatcher must have been going crazy. And
I got
this
a
one,
defense. It was pocket dial.
yeah, yeah,
That's my defense.
When he's saying like, "Oh, well, my girlfriend's trying to kill me," click. My girlfriend's trying to kill me, click, over and over again. And this is another odd story that came up last night and broke kind of late in the night. We still don't know why a man drove up to TPD's District 3 headquarters on 22nd Street on Tuesday with a decomposing body in the trunk of the car. Medical examiner's office is still investigating, along with the Tampa Police Department. You wonder why I love being a prosecutor and a journalist, police reports like these, and why you can't make this stuff up. So with that, we're going to get out of here. Keith Goan, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for
here
having
on
me,
the
Felix.
docket. Definitely have you back. Great topics that we talked about tonight, and we appreciate your insight. Next week, we're going to take a break. I'm going to go see my parents for Thanksgiving. We'll be back with more on November 30th. I know what I'm thankful for this year is the opportunity to be on air, not only over at Fox 13, becoming